Our top stories: United States and Russia digging over Ukraine crisis as Blinken visits Kyiv. First relief flight lands in tsunami-hit Tonga, several others coming. US President considering redesignating Houthis as terrorist group. And Guterres, United Nations boss, cites demonstrable effort for Ethiopia peace after call. Tonight, again, I bring to you news making international headlines from our studio here on ECWA Television Africa. Glad you could join us. This is International News Desk, and I am Lois Turaki. Here are details of our top stories and other stories. The United States and Russia have put in their heels over Russia's military buildup on Ukraine's border, with no sign either will back down from firm positions that have heightened fears of a Russian attack and a new war in Europe. In advance of serious talks Friday between U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, the two sides appear no closer to any negotiation that might reduce tensions and prevent the threat of a Russian invasion. Meanwhile, Ukraine said it was ready for the worst and will survive whatever difficulties come its way. On a visit to Ukraine capital, Kyiv, on Wednesday, Blinken accused Russia of preparation to strengthen the more than 100,000 troops it has deployed along the Ukrainian border and suggested that number could double on relatively short order. He did not give details, but Russia has sent an indefinite number of troops from the country's far east to its ally Belarus, which also shares a border with Ukraine, for major war games next month. United States President Joe Biden predicted Russia will make a move on Ukraine, speaking during a news conference at the White House later on Wednesday, saying it will pay dearly for a full-scale invasion, but suggesting there could be a lower cost for a minor incursion. My guess is he will move in, Biden said of Putin at a news conference. He has to do something. According to White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, she said if any Russian military forces move across the Ukrainian border, that's a renewed invasion, and it will be met with a swift, severe, and united response from the United States and our allies. But cyber attacks and paramilitary tactics by Russia will be met with a decisive, reciprocal, and united response, she added. After the runway at the Pacific Island nation's main airport was cleared of ash and debris from last weekend's devastating volcanic eruption and tsunami, the first flights carrying emergency relief supplies for Tonga have landed, and more are on their way. Like several other parts of the country, the runway at Nuku Alaufa was covered in ash after the eruption of Hunga Tonga, Hunga Ha'aipai, an overseas volcano which sends giant spirals of ash, volcano debris, and smoke into the air. A New Zealand Air Force Hercules C-130 transport plane is now on the ground in Tonga after a 4-day journey from Auckland. Foreign Minister Nanaia Mahuta said in a joint statement from the country's foreign and defense ministries on Thursday, the aircraft is carrying humanitarian aid and disaster relief supplies, including water, containers, kits for temporary shelters, generators, hygiene and family kits, and communications equipment. The plane is likely to remain at the airport for about 9 minutes before returning to New Zealand, given concerns about the coronavirus. Tonga is one of the few countries in the world that is COVID-19 free and has maintained strict border controls. Japan's Ministry of Defense as well said it will send relief by air with 2 C-130 planes due to depart as early as today. The planes will carry drinking water, the ministry said on Twitter. The United Nations and aid agencies have stressed the urgent need to get fresh water to the islands after the salt water from the tsunami contaminated the supplies. A ship from the New Zealand Navy carrying 250,000 liters of fresh water and with the ability to produce 70,000 liters of fresh water a day through its desalination plant is expected to arrive on Friday, while Australia's HMAS Adelaide is being loaded with supplies and equipment in Brisbane. Now in the United States of America, Joe Biden, the U.S. president, is considering redesignating Yemen's Houthi group as an international terrorist organization, following drone and missile attacks on the United Arab Emirates UAE that were claimed by the group. The announcement at a news conference on Wednesday came just after the UAE ambassador to the United States, Yusuf Al-Otaiba, urged the Biden administration to restore the designation in response to Monday's attacks on an oil facility in Abu Dhabi. The U.S. Department of State reversed a last-minute Trump administration decision last year, which put the Houthis on the U.S. list of foreign terrorist groups and exposed them to sanctions in order to facilitate the delivery of humanitarian assistance to Yemen. Biden said restoring the designation was under consideration, but added that it's going to be very difficult to end the conflict opposing the Houthis against Yemen's internationally recognized government and a Saudi-led military coalition which the UAE belongs to. Meanwhile, in Africa, Antonio Guterres, United Nations chief, said there is a real opportunity for an end to more than 14 months of fighting between government and Tigrayan forces following a call with the African Union's special envoy. On Wednesday, Guterres' statement gave no facts about his conversation with Olusegun Obasanjo, the former president of Nigeria, which followed the envoy's latest visit to Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, and the capital of Ethiopia's northernmost region of Tigray, Mekelle. He said, Mr. Obasanjo briefed me about the efforts being made by the government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, to move towards a resolution of the violent conflict and expressed optimism that there is now a real opportunity for political and diplomatic resolution of the conflict without describing the efforts. I am delighted that after over a year of armed conflict, which has affected millions of people across Ethiopia and the rest of the region, there is now a demonstrable effort to make peace, he added. Ethiopia's war broke out in November 2020 following months of mounting tensions between Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government and the TPLF, the former ruling party of Tigray. Abiy had declared victory on November 28 after federal forces captured Mekelle, but fighting continued. Within months, the surge of war turned and the Tigrayan forces eventually recovered most of the territory they lost before launching counter-offensives in the neighboring Amhara and Afar regions. The fighting has killed an estimated tens of thousands of people and displaced millions, and according to United Nations estimates, driven hundreds of thousands to the brink of starvation. Despite his mention of optimism, Guterres also warned that ongoing military operations in some parts of Ethiopia remain a challenge to the peace process and saw the confidence-building measures that we hope are being taken by all parties in the conflict. Guterres called to all parties to move rapidly towards cessation of hostilities, and he said that the United Nations watches the African Union-led mediation efforts with great hope. On other stories, convicts sentenced to 15 years over jail rapes in Democratic Republic of Congo. Lawyers said 10 convicts have been handed 15-year jail terms for the rape of dozens of female inmates at the prison in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 56 women were frequently raped during a 3-day uprising at Kasapa jail in Lubumbashi in September 2020. 3 of the women were infected with HIV, which causes AIDS, and 16 became pregnant after the assault, according to lawyers for the victims. Lieutenant Peter Ntagalo, a security officer in Hot Katanga, told news agency via a phone call the court has found 10 prisoners guilty of raping over 30 women inmates. They stormed into the women's section of the prison during riots in the prison in September 2020 and raped them. Prosecutors had pursued 20-year terms against the accused, who were also sentenced on Wednesday to pay the equivalent of $5,000 to each of the women. A lawyer for the victims said, according to reports, "We are satisfied with the verdict, which came after a long fight against justice for my clients, Delani Mumba." Defense lawyer Noel Bashizi said she will consult her clients about whether to appeal. It's the Congolese state who should be prosecuted. It's responsible for the bad jail conditions, she said. The women were raped over 3 days and no one intervened, and yet there's a police base close to the jail. In addition to committing mass rape, the 10 were convicted of setting fire to the prison. Still in Africa, Gambia's president sworn in for a second term. According to reports, Gambian President Adama Barrow was sworn in for a second term on Wednesday at ceremonies near the capital, Banjul. Barrow's first election in 2016 put an end to more than 20 years of Yahya Jammeh's rule over the tiny West African nation. Winning 53% of the vote, the former property developer was re-elected in December. He was sworn in for a second 5-year term at a stadium at Bakau on the outskirts of Banjul in ceremonies attended by foreign VIPs that climaxed with a 21-gun salute. The election in December was peaceful and marked the first vote in the former British colony of 2 million people since Jammeh fled into exile in January 2017 after his surprise defeat at the ballot box. Jammeh ruled for 22 years, governing over a regime accused of a litany of abuses, including death squads and torture. The United Democratic Party of leading opposition candidate Wasino Dobos appealed the election results to the Supreme Court, alleging irregularities and corruption in Barrow's campaign. The plea was dismissed. Back in Nigeria, Nigerian court maintains treason charges against Nnamdi Kanu. On Wednesday, a Nigerian court ruled that the 2017 arrest of Nnamdi Kanu, accused of leading a secessionist campaign in the country's southeast, was illegal. But the same court sustained the state's treason charges against Kanu. It said Kanu's violent arrest in 2017 was a breach on his rights. The court awarded $2.4 million against the government. The leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, was extradited to Nigeria from London last year, where he had fled after being released on bail in 2017. Kanu faces numerous counts of terrorism and treason. He denies the charges. He is running a movement on the platform of IPOB for reawakening of the Biafra Republic, a secession movement that led to a civil war in 1967 to 1970 to bring Southeast back under the control of Abuja. The war caused the death of more than 1 million people. Nigeria has blamed last year's attacks on police and security personnel on Kanu's separatist group, a claim the movement denies. Dissatisfaction with Abuja is common in the southeast over alleged marginalization and abuses by the oil industry. Finally, on sports, on the ongoing African Cup of Nations, Nigeria, Egypt into knockout stage after Group D wins. Nigeria ended Group D with a third successive win as they beat Guinea-Bissau 2-0, leaving runners-up Egypt to face the winners of Group E in the next round and a possible clash with the Ivorians. Mohamed Abdelmonem's header at a corner 10 minutes before halftime in Yaoundé sent the Pharaohs through and eliminated Sudan, and also saw Ivory Coast, Mali, Gambia, Malawi and Cape Verde qualify without kicking a ball. I think Egypt deserved to win this game without any doubts given the opportunities we created and the football we played, said Egypt coach Carlos Queiroz. Egypt's victory guaranteed Cape Verde and Malawi will qualify as two of the four best third-place sides. Ivory Coast led Group E with 4 points and can finish no lower than third regardless of their result Thursday against reigning champions Algeria. The same applies to Gambia and Mali in Group F. Both nations have 4 points from 2 games. 3-time former winners Nigeria continued their fine start to the competition by sweeping aside Guinea-Bissau, courtesy of second-half goals from Umar Sadiq and captain William Truth Ekong. And that's you up to date with international news stories. But before I go, a quick recap of our major stories. The United States and Russia dig in over Ukraine crisis as Blinken visits Kyiv. First relief flight lands in tsunami-hit Tonga, several others coming. And United States President considering redesignating Houthis as terrorist group. And Guterres, United Nations boss cites demonstrable reports for Ethiopia peace after call. Remember, democracy is about voting and it's about a majority vote. And it's time that we started exercising the democratic process. This is from Debbie Stape now. With this, from all of us at Equa Television, good night.